Hello YouTube family, thanks for joining me on my videos. If you like the videos, please give me a like. If you've not subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching the videos. Sincerely, thanks for watching. Hello YouTube family, thanks for joining me on this video. Again, like my last video, this video is going to be discussing the recent Roe versus Wade decision where they overturned Roe versus Wade, Dobbs versus Jackson's Women Health Organization Supreme Court case. So the case was, I think originally in 2019, brought up in Mississippi, and it made its way to the Supreme Court. Originally, the right-wingers pushing this case. I mean, this is one of those cases, you've had right-wingers in red states across the country for years creating laws restricting abortion just to push it to the Supreme Court and see what kind of parameters they can put on Roe versus Wade to restrict it more. When this case first was taken up to the Supreme Court, they didn't have a particularly significant ask. They were just looking for the court to uphold the 15-week ban that's banning abortions beyond 15 weeks of pregnancy in the state. What changed was Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and then was very quickly, in a matter of a couple of weeks, replaced by a very religiously right-wing ideologue woman in Amy Coney Barrett. Anyone who's been following this stuff knows that history, that RBG died. She was replaced by a very religiously right-wing ideologue. And after that happened, that's when the right-wingers in Mississippi pushing this case changed their ask from the Supreme Court upholding their 15-week abortion ban to requesting that Roe versus Wade get overturned. That's how we got to the point we were at when the case was being argued in front of the Supreme Court. And we've had protests around the country. We've had counter-protesters, which I don't even understand why the counter-protesters really show up. I mean, as far as the Roe versus Wade argument, they won. They got what they wanted. Roe versus Wade has been overturned, and so now state by state, states can determine to ban abortion completely, partially, however they're going to do it. Of course, in most blue states, I assume in all blue states, heavily Democrat-controlled states, abortion will remain completely legal. But you have the counter-protesters that show up to jeer and antagonize women who are seriously upset about their rights being taken away. Anyone should understand someone's going to be upset when their rights get taken away. But it is what it is right now. Roe versus Wade has been overturned. There's no particular path forward to get it back right now. I mean, this is 2022, almost July of 2022, and this court is not going to reverse course. I mean, the right-wing people that were placed on this court, particularly recently, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, were specifically chosen because they all specifically disagreed personally because of their right-wing religious views with Roe versus Wade. Now, religious views should not come into play when determining making a decision in the Supreme Court. It shouldn't, but it will. With these people, because that's how they view everything, is through their own personal religious ideology. And so it's not going to change anytime soon. I mean, to tell you the truth, the way I'm looking at it right now, I don't know that there will be any significant change on abortion favorably before I die. It's very likely that abortion will be even more restricted before I pass away than we will have a positive change and get these rights back. And not only abortion rights, there are other rights that will fall as well. I mean, on this topic, Democratic leadership has failed America, and in particular, they failed their constituents, people who vote Democrat. I mean, back in 2017, you had Nancy Pelosi make the comment that abortion rights are not a priority. Back when Obama first got elected, and Democrats in 2009 had a supermajority in Congress and could have passed a law to make sure abortion rights stayed in place, Obama said it wasn't a priority. And there were other issues when he took office. I'm not going to say there weren't other issues, but Democrats have completely ignored this to the point where, like I said in my last video, as soon as that majority decision was leaked, within 3 days I got 2 emails asking for money. The Democrat Party is using women's rights being stripped away from them as a way to try and raise more money. And they've raised it. Millions and millions of dollars they've raised. So the Democrats are looking at this as a good thing for them because it's helping them get more money. Meanwhile, they are doing nothing to fix the problem that women are going to face. And, I mean, abortion is not just terminating a pregnancy. I mean, you have so many different ways abortion affects women and women's health. I mean, you can have, there's spontaneous abortions. That's what, or miscarriages are termed as. The body aborts a pregnancy. Sometimes when the body aborts a pregnancy, it doesn't go quite right. You know, a fertilized egg travels down the fallopian tubes, embeds in the uterine lining, and starts to develop more and more cells, starts to turn into a embryo, then a fetus. But sometimes early in that process, the body determines there's something wrong, and the body itself aborts the pregnancy. However, sometimes, although the body tries to flush the fertilized egg out of the woman, it doesn't accomplish it, and the egg's still stuck in the woman's uterus, not ever going to turn into a baby. But what it can do is fester, get infected, and cause a lot of problems for the women, including death. I mean, and one way of getting that egg out of a woman is through a abortion procedure to get this infected cell out of the woman's uterus. You have pregnancies, the ectopic pregnancies, where the egg's outside of the uterus or whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of problems that arise with this archaic ideology of, well, I'm going to follow my personal religious beliefs and force them on the country as a whole. And there was just a story today or yesterday, a woman who has cancer, who's pregnant, and she needs radiation treatment. In order to get the radiation treatment, she would need to have her pregnancy aborted. She can't get her pregnancy aborted, so she can't get the radiation treatment. I mean, you have people who will bring up that there are going to be women who are going to die because of this law. because of unprofessional, either trying to self-induce an abortion, or they're going to go to somebody who's not a doctor or not a professional, not able to do it well. And there will be some women get hurt, some women that will end up ultimately killing themselves trying to terminate their own pregnancy. You have other women, like the woman with the cancer issue. She's pregnant, she has cancer, she needs treatment for the cancer. She can't get that while she has the baby inside of her. She needs an abortion in order to keep herself from dying of cancer. Can't get that done. There are many ways these laws are going to cause women to die. And this pro-life party really doesn't give a damn how many women die. They don't care. They don't care how many women die. They don't care about the lives of children. This was never about pro-life. It was never about protecting life or children or anything else. It's about power. It's ultimately to have power over women, power that, for whatever reason, right-wing men believe they've lost some control they used to have over women, and they want that control back. And this is one step in it. But, as I said, you have some states that have trigger laws in place, where as soon as Roe versus Wade got overturned, those trigger laws took effect. And states with trigger laws are Arkansas, Idaho, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, Wyoming, Missouri, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Utah. I mean, as you can tell, it's a bunch of very heavily right-wing states that had trigger laws in place so that as soon as Roe versus Wade is overturned, they're able to have abortion be banned immediately. And for women in those states, particularly women without means, it's a very bad thing. They're not going to be able to get an abortion. They're going to have less control over their life, which is the point. And the decision that the Supreme Court made in this case, where they basically said the enumerated rights don't exist. The framework, the foundation that Roe versus Wade was sitting on doesn't exist. And the thing is, you have the right wing doing a bit of a tap dance right now because you have people talking about all the other rights that are sitting on the same foundation that Roe versus Wade was, that are now in danger of being overturned by this right-wing ideological court. And you have Republicans try to say, oh, no, we're not going after anything else. We're happy with this. Which isn't true. I mean, just by reading the concurrence by Clarence Thomas, one of the Supreme Court justices, one of the right-wing religious ideologues on the court, made it very clear he wants the court to go after all, well, not necessarily all. He specifically listed 3 other cases that sit on the same foundation of Roe. But I wanted to address the 9th Amendment in discussing this. And the 9th Amendment is non-enumerated rights retained by people. And it simply states the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And the 9th Amendment was specifically put in place by the framers of this country, the framers of this document, the first Congress, as they were, I believe I touched on this at least some in my last video, but they were arguing over how to address rights of the people in the Constitution. Like, for instance, you had people like James Madison, John Adams, who wanted rights in the Constitution. I believe it was John Adams wanted a Bill of Rights. There were some others in the first Congress that didn't want to list rights because they looked at it as, if we try and list all the rights people have, we'll never stop writing. And this Ninth Amendment was kind of the compromise between those two groups. They got the Bill of Rights put in. They enumerated or listed in clear black and white some rights, and then they put in the Ninth Amendment to say that even though there are some enumerated rights in the Constitution, that does not deny the unenumerated rights, the non-enumerated rights, still held by the people of the United States. And that's, if you read through the decision, the majority of decision written on this Roe decision recently, you will see that they mention a number of rights in the Bill of Rights. They do not mention the Ninth Amendment whatsoever, because the argument that Alito's trying to make in his majority decision is blown up completely by the Ninth Amendment. He's trying to say that if something is not specifically written in the Constitution, then it's not a right. Whereas the Ninth Amendment specifically says there are rights specifically written in the Constitution, there are rights that are specifically not written in the Constitution that are still retained by the people. And so Alito conveniently, in his majority decision, avoided the Ninth Amendment because it ruined his argument. His argument was these non-enumerated rights that were derived from the 14th Amendment and the Due Process Clause do not exist. And other things that exist from that clause include same-sex marriage. It includes sexual activity that's not that's considered sodomy in some states, and it includes access, or the right to have access to contraception. And there are some states that used to ban contraception. It was, I believe, 1965 was when the Griswold case came about. Yeah, 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut was the case that the Supreme Court justices said that you absolutely have a right to purchase contraception to avoid pregnancies. But in that recent decision, they were saying this stuff doesn't exist. And I want to make it clear that if the Supreme Court's saying the foundation that Roe sat on did not exist, they're also at the same time trying to say we're not going to go after these other rights, which they cannot logically do, because if the foundation Roe was sitting on does not exist, so Roe can't hold up in their mind, then the right to contraception is on that foundation. It can't hold up. The right to same-sex marriage, the right to engage in sexual activity of your choice in your private bedroom, also can't hold up. So logically, they can't make the argument that they're not going after these other rights, because if the foundation for Roe doesn't exist, the foundation for these other rights don't exist either. They've already made the argument to do away with the other rights. So when they're saying they're not going after other rights, what they're doing is lying. And so now you have the protests, you have women in despair, particularly young women, because they're the ones who are going to be affected by this. They're the ones who have reproductive years ahead of them. They're the ones who are going to have to be careful very careful in life because there is a particular party, the Republican Party, that will be looking to incarcerate them if they don't do what the Republican Party's religious ideological views say they should do. So you have the 13 states that have trigger laws. You have a host of other states that are working on getting laws in place to accommodate the Roe decision. Some of the trigger laws kick in immediately, so some states already, last week, as soon as the decision was released, in some of those states, abortion was banned to whatever degree their trigger law has it. Some of them are complete bans. Some of them will start banning it, say 5 weeks or 6 weeks. Some of them have carve-outs for rape or incest. Some don't. The Attorney General of Missouri proudly proclaimed that my office has effectively ended abortion in Missouri, becoming the first state to do so following the court's ruling. So he was very proud to say that his state outlawed abortion as soon as the ruling came down. And this is the modern Republican Party. They're gleeful that they're taking these rights away from people. There are 9 states that have abortion rights in their state constitutions: Alaska, California, Florida, Illinois, Kansas, Massachusetts, Montana, New Jersey, Minnesota. And so, since they have abortion rights in their constitution, those states cannot ban abortion. But with this Roe decision, what they can do is significantly limit access to abortion, as long as it's in line with however it's written in their particular state. There are 16 states that have moved to protect abortion rights since this decision came out. Those are California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Oregon, Vermont, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, and Washington State have all moved to try and protect abortion in their state, which is a good thing as long as they can get it into law, into code, in case Republicans were to take over one of those states. At least it's already in law, and Republicans would have to get enough of a majority to overturn the law that's created. It's some protection. In 2017, you had a right-wing pundit who suggested Amy Coney Barrett. In 2017, he suggested Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court because, one, she's a super right-wing religious ideologue. I mean, when she was in college, lived with religious cultists, a cultist couple, religious cult couple, while she was in college. But this right-wing pundit, Ranesh Panuru, suggested Amy Coney Barrett be put on the Supreme Court for optics, so it wouldn't be a bunch of white right-wing men taking abortion rights away. You know, he suggested Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court so that there's a woman giving her stamp of approval on taking abortion rights away from women. And as I said, Clarence Thomas brought up 3 other cases that stand on the same foundation that Roe does. And one of those is Griswold versus Connecticut. As I said, it was a 1965 Supreme Court case where contraception was decriminalized. You had states that had made it illegal to access contraception. And you had the Obergefell versus Hodges case in the 2000s where same-sex marriage became legal. And then you had the Lawrence v. Texas. So Lawrence, Obergefell, and Griswold were specifically the 3 cases that Clarence Thomas brought up in his concurring decision that the court should attack next, which is the right to contraception, the right to sexual activity in the privacy of your own home, and the right for same-sex marriage. Oddly enough, one of the cases that stands on the same framework as Roe, as Griswold, Obergefell, and Lawrence is a case called Loving versus Virginia. It was a 1967 case. The Loving versus Virginia case is the Supreme Court case that said states could not make interracial marriage illegal. It protected interracial marriage. And I thought it was funny that Clarence Thomas brought up these three other cases on the same foundation as Roe, but he didn't mention Loving at all, because he is a right-wing religious ideologue who is in a interracial marriage. He's a black man, his wife is white. So, oddly enough, he attacked Roe, concurring with the decision they made last week. He also attacked Griswold, Obergefell, and Lawrence, and conveniently left out Loving v. Virginia, which is the case that would potentially make his marriage null. So, even in his suggestion to attack other rights, he was looking out for his own rights, even though, as I said, they all sit on the same foundation. All of them sit on the same foundation. They were all derived from the 14th Amendment, from the Due Process Clause, and the right to privacy. But Thomas said, attack these rights, don't attack my rights. And that's where we're at right now. And as I said, those other rights, Loving v. Virginia, Obergefell, Lawrence, and Griswold, will be the next ones to be attacked. I mean, I don't know if they're going to go after gay marriage next, same-sex marriage, or if they'll go after contraception. You already have some red states that have put it through laws restricting access to contraception. I believe I mentioned this in my last video as well. You have a number of states that are attacking contraception that women use, typically like an IUD. An IUD device is the device a woman has implanted in her uterus that prevents a fertilized egg from embedding in the uterine lining. It just gets flushed out in a period, and she doesn't get pregnant. Then you have stuff like the morning after pills or whatever, various ways to prevent pregnancy, and they are being attacked. But right now I want to go to a series of videos. It's Kamala Harris did an interview with Dana Bash from CNN, and I think it was telling, really, how the Democrat Party does not have an answer for this. But bear with me.
It's one thing when you know something's going to happen. It's another thing when it actually happens. And I just actually... because they actually did it.
Well, I don't know if that video played correctly or not. It looked like it messed up in the middle. But Kamala Harris there was saying that she was shocked that the Supreme Court actually did this, that they actually overturned Roe versus Wade, which I find funny. This second video is from later in the interview, but it goes against what she just said, where she was saying she was shocked they actually did it.
You were a senator when now Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh testified about many issues, including obviously Roe, at the confirmation hearings. Now, Justice Gorsuch said it had been reaffirmed many times. Kavanaugh called it precedent on precedent. At that particular hearing, you were there. Some senators say that they intentionally misled the public and the Congress. What do you think?
I never believed them. I didn't believe them. That's why I voted against them.
So in the first video, she was saying she was shocked they actually did it. And then in the second video from later in the interview, she was saying that she didn't believe them from the get-go, that they weren't going to attack Roe versus Wade. Which is at odds with herself. Claiming that she did not believe them, but then somehow was shocked that they overturned Roe.
Will the administration actively challenge state laws that make it a crime for someone to help a woman travel to another state for an abortion?
So the president rightly last week when the decision came down indicated quite unambiguously that we will do everything within our power as an administration through the executive branch to ensure that women have access to the medication they need, which has been, by the way, FDA approved, and that they will have freedom of travel and that travel should be unrestricted.
And you're going to do that through the courts if need be?
I am sure that our Department of Justice is going to do that based on every statement that the Attorney General has made.
So there, Dana Bash had asked her about states that were trying to ban travel for abortions. And there are states that are already working on that because they realize that one of the ways that people in their state will be able to access abortion will be to travel to a state where abortion is legal. And they're trying to make the travel for abortion illegal in that state. And she was asking Kamala Harris, who is the vice president, if they have an answer for that, if there's a solution to what the red states are trying to do to their populations, some of whom are going to seek an abortion. That's just a matter of fact. And Kamala Harris did not answer the question. She said a lot of different things. They want to ensure women have access to medication they need. She trusts the DOJ is going to do something about it. Like what? I mean, the DOJ is not really pursuing much right now, and they're not very staunch about doing it. And why would we believe that the DOJ is going to deal with states trying to keep people in so they can't go out and get an abortion? But she didn't answer the question. That's the key point to that, is she couldn't answer the question because the Democrats have no answers right now.
Can the administration expand abortion access, abortion services on federal land, meaning provide the access on federal land that might be in and around states?
Now what we are discussing, but
So in those two clips, you had Dana Bash ask about abortion access on federal land. That's one of the things people have brought up. The federal government has land in states all over the country. In every state they have land. And federal lands are not subject to the state law. They're subject to federal law. And so people have asked the question whether the federal government can use state land they have and cheaply rent that out to abortion providers to provide abortions in states that are going to make it illegal. And as Kamala Harris said, that's not what they're discussing right now. So no, they have no plans. They've not even considered that, apparently, as an option for allowing people to have access to abortions in states that are some have already banned abortion. More are going to fall. There's around 13 now. This time next month there may be 26.
also recognize, Dana, that we are 130 odd days away from an election, which is going to include Senate races, right? Part of the issue here is that the court has acted, now Congress needs to act. But if you count the votes, don't appear to have the votes in the Senate. Well, there's an election happening.
So there you had Kamala Harris bringing up that there's an election in 130 some odd days. We need you to elect more Democrats. Why? Democrats have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Why do we need to elect more? What's to make an American voter think if they elect more Democrats, something will get done? You have control. You have the presidency. You have the power to put pressure on Democrats who aren't playing along, but you're not doing it. Why would someone think that just by electing more Democrats, something will magically get done?
President do any of what you just talked about with his pen, without Congress?
Listen, we have, as a democracy, invested in Congress an incredible amount of power, and specifically the power to create laws. And so we are going to require and depend on Congress to see this through, which means we do need to have the numbers in Congress who are willing to say that they stand for supporting women in every way, including women and men as parents, and all of the cost of being a parent.
So let me ask you about that. You're saying now, the president said that this fall Roe is on the ballot. But what do you say to Democratic voters who argue, wait a minute, we worked really hard to elect a Democratic president and vice president, Democratic-led House, a Democratic-led Senate. Do it now.
And there, Dan Bash was saying, why not do it now? And Kamala's answer, again, is very telling.
But do what now? What now? I mean, we need...
She's like, do what now? What the hell you think we've been talking about? Do something to fix the problem that women are facing with their rights being taken away. And Kamala Harris goes back into talking about, well, we expanded the child tax credit. Yeah, and you also let it sunset. You expanded the child tax credit, lifted around 50% of the children in poverty out of poverty, then you let it sunset because Joe Manchin didn't want to support it anymore. And so, since he's apparently the president, it sunsetted, and those nearly 50% of children sunk back into poverty. But Kamala Harris's confusion over do what now? Be president, vice president, a Congress, a Senate, and put together a law to codify Roe.
Ways you can do it, obviously. One of the only way that is legislatively, procedurally possible is by doing away with the filibuster on this issue. President Biden told my colleague Anderson Cooper he would be okay with eliminating the filibuster to pass voting rights and, quote, maybe more. Would you support eliminating the filibuster in order to pass federal legislation for abortion rights?
Right now, given the current composition of the Senate, the votes aren't there.
But would you use the bully pulpit to say, yes, I support it?
Well, here's the thing. I understand why you're asking the question, but the reality of it is we don't even get to really answer that in terms of whether it happens or not if we don't have the numbers in the Senate. And again, that's why I keep coming back to the importance of an election that is only 130 odd days away, because it really does matter. I sit as the vice president there for the president of the Senate. I was in the Senate for 4 years representing the state of California. And if you don't have the votes, you can't move anything. We've seen countless examples, sadly, of that. This Senate, in the current composition, would not pass voting rights legislation.
Right.
And so Dan Bash was bringing it up that basically the only way to move forward right now on fixing the Roe versus Wade problem would be to eliminate the filibuster so that Democrats could pass the legislation without filibuster holding them back. And Kamala Harris was saying that we don't have the votes to do away with the filibuster for this. And we all know why that is, because Joe Manchin will not do away with the filibuster, neither will Kyrsten Sinema, because those two have gleefully kept the Democrats from accomplishing anything while they have control right now in Congress and the presidency. And so that's what you can take away. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the Democrat leadership in the Congress, and Pelosi, Schumer, they look at it as like, well, there's nothing we can do. Joe Manchin said no. So there's nothing we can do. You just have to accept your rights being taken away. And by the way, please give us money because there's elections coming up. And this last video of the interview, I think, is very telling on Kamala Harris's perspective.
My husband and I are actually talking about it. We have a 23-year-old, and my mother-in-law's in her 80s. Our daughter will not know the rights for the amount of time that my mother-in-law knew these rights.
And so there Kamala Harris was explaining that she has a 23-year-old daughter. Her mother-in-law is in her 80s, and her daughter, who's 23, will not know these rights for the amount of time my mother-in-law did. So that's Kamala Harris, in her own words, saying that nothing is going to get done. My daughter will go for years not knowing what it's like to have a federal right to an abortion the way my mother-in-law did, who's in her 80s. So Kamala Harris is telling you right there that she doesn't see any movement on this. The Democrats have no plans. They have no strategy. Kamala Harris acted like she was shocked that it happened. And perhaps Biden and Schumer and Pelosi, all these Democrat leaders, perhaps are all going to claim that they're surprised that it happened. But Nancy Pelosi, both financially and verbally, supported the re-election of Henry Cuellar in Texas. Henry Cuellar is a very corrupt, very worthless, right-wing Democrat in Texas who happens to be very vocally anti-abortion. He supports overturning Roe v. Wade, and the Democratic leader in the House, Nancy Pelosi, supported him. You have these Democrats saying, we don't have enough people to do the things you want us to do. Meanwhile, she's literally out campaigning for someone who's against what you're wanting them to do. I mean, there's no simple answer to this. I mean, what can be done? You've got, like, some of the things Dana Bash brought up, things that are being discussed, you know. Perhaps someone will stand up a charity that will help fund women of low means be able to travel to and get access to an abortion. That would be very limited. It would be limited on how much money they can take in, how much reach they can have among all these red states. I mean, over half the country are red states. Not half the population, but over half the country states. I mean, you have a lot of very low populated, very red states. I brought this up before too. You know, you could put together any number of 4 to 6 states, and you would not red states like Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota. Can put them together, and they don't have the population of LA County added together. I mean, the population is on the Democrat side. However, control of states is on the Republican side. They have control of more states. There are going to be a lot of states that are going to ban abortion, either somewhat or completely. And, perhaps there will be charities that will start up to help women access abortion. You have people who brought up the whole thing of government land. The federal government has land in every state. They could lease land to abortion providers inexpensively so they can provide abortions in states where abortion is banned. Things like this, you can try. All of it will be fought in court. And if it makes it up to the Supreme Court, I wouldn't count on it holding up. Like I said, I don't know that this is going to be fixed during my lifetime. I'm 50. There's a good chance I will die and nothing will be done to have fixed this. Because the Democrats are too incompetent right now to do it. They're too corrupt, for one. Democrats are more worried about keeping their wealthy donors happy, corporations and billionaires, than they are about serving their constituents. That's why they're leaving their constituents bitter and upset. This year's midterms. There's a high likelihood, that the midterms this year will be a bloodbath for the Democrats. They've had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they've accomplished next to nothing, while allowing women's rights that women have had for 5 decades to be stripped from them seemingly overnight. And Democrats somehow expect people to show up and vote for them. But, you've got to give somebody a reason to show up and vote. If you accomplish nothing and say, just vote for more of us, and then maybe we'll accomplish something, that's not inspiring confidence that you're a party that can get anything done. Typically, when a party takes control of the White House, the following midterms, the other party has significant gains in the midterm elections. That's this midterm that's coming up in November. And most likely, the Republicans are going to take control of the House. This midterm year happens to be a rather favorable map for Democrats in the Senate. It's possible Democrats could keep control of the Senate in the midterms. It's also just as possible that they could lose the Senate and the House. They could lose the House by a half a dozen seats, or they could have an absolute bloodbath and lose the House significantly. But if they lose one House of Congress, nothing else is getting done. Biden's presidency is over starting January of next year, when the new Congress shows up. If Republicans take one House out of the Congress, Biden is accomplishing nothing else. And so, beyond these midterms, then you look at 2024, when whoever is going to end up running for president, and maybe Biden will run for re-election. I don't know why you accomplish nothing and then think, maybe I can get re-elected. But maybe Biden won't. He's really elevated in age. He's obviously lost more than a step. He's lost several steps mentally due to elevated age. There's nothing wrong with that. We all get older, and we're all going to lose our mental faculties at different paces. But, he's nearly 80. He's not who he was 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 40 years ago. And honestly, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, he wasn't that significant of a guy anyway. Most of what Joe Biden had accomplished when he was in the Senate for decades was whipping up Democrat votes to pass Republican legislation that ended up hurting Democrat voters. I mean, so the things that Joe Biden's tried to brag about accomplishing in the Senate, you know, he claimed that he was this guy that could get it done. He knows how the Senate works. He's going to be able to make deals and get things done in the Senate. No, he can't. Because before, he was a right-wing Democrat who was talking other Democrats into supporting Republican legislation. The Republicans weren't fighting him because he was trying to get their legislation passed. Now, you have the Democrat base and a portion of the Democrat Party. I mean, not all Democrats are corrupt. Not all of them are bad. But most are. You have a small group in the House. You have an even smaller group in the Senate that are actually trying to do something good. That are willing to do what's necessary to do something good. You have people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in the Senate who would be willing to do away with a filibuster to get voting rights passed, to get abortion law passed. You have a group in the House, maybe it's 12 people, maybe it's 18 people. It's not that big. Who are willing to do that? I mean, for Democrat voters, if you are a Democrat voter watching this, what you need to do is show up in primaries and get these old, corrupt, on the take Democrats out of office. And I know that's difficult to do because you've got to show up and vote in the primary. I mean, if you are in a state where they do mail-in primary ballots, then by all means do that. I mailed mine in this year. Nevada does mail-in ballots for the primary and the general election. It's pretty simple, but even if I had to show up and vote, I would have showed up and voted. Because I want to take control of who's getting on the ballot. That's what we have to do to actually make positive change. Is we have to make the determination of who's getting on the ballot, not let the parties determine who's getting on the ballot. But like I said, I don't see much changing. Honestly, if I had to guess, I would guess that we will have a federal ban on abortion before we'll have abortion rights back in this country. I think the likelihood is greater right now that by 2024 we will end up with a Republican president along with a Republican House and Senate who will, if they need to, do away with the filibuster to ban abortion nationwide. That's the thing. Democrats are they hold on so stupidly to stuff like the filibuster. And the Republicans will just do away with it to accomplish what they want to do. And the Democrats, when Republicans do that, because if Republicans take control of the House and the Senate and the presidency by 2024, by the 2024 election, they will ban abortion nationwide. They'll ban same-sex marriage. They'll ban sodomy. And you'll have a contingent wanting to ban interracial marriage nationwide. And they will be willing to do away with the filibuster to take people's rights away, because that's what the Republican Party is about, is control. They want to control your life, my life, and they will do away with the filibuster to do that. Democrats can't get it through their heads that they need to be able to do the same thing to help people to have rights protected. And the thing is, if Democrats would make these moves to protect people's rights, they would be willing to do away with the filibuster to protect voting rights, to protect abortion rights. They might actually win these elections coming up. But when they do nothing, I don't know how they expect to win. But that's it. I mean, If you're really serious about this, having your rights taken away, make sure you show up and vote. Make sure you scream at everybody, all your friends and family, co-workers, whoever, to show up and vote. That's the only way we're going to fix anything. And primarily, show up in the primaries. Make sure you get progressive politicians who are not on the take from corporations on the ballot, and then vote them into office. I don't know that it's happening. Like I said, I mean, somewhat, I'm a bit of a downer person. I'm the guy that sees the one dark cloud in the otherwise clear sky. But I don't see Democrats being competent enough to do what they need to do to win elections at this point. I mean, they have a majority of the country on their side, but they've got to get those people out to vote. And if they do nothing, it's harder to get people out to vote, especially if they've got to take time off work, miss money out of their paychecks to go vote. But right now, it's not looking good. And the future's not that bright for abortion rights. But please let me know in the comments. Agree, disagree. Tell me I'm doing well, doing not well. Like, subscribe, and by all means, thanks for watching. And I hope you all have a pleasant day.